What's up, everybody? We're on a podcast now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about a couple different interviews with, obviously, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth director and whatever Part 3's name is going to be, director Hamaguchi. He went on probably his 10th press tour at this point. This man likes to talk, and honestly, he is, I think, one of the most transparent, not just Japanese developers, I think he's one of the most transparent developers we have in gaming. Now, does he ever, fully give away things? No, but he just is he always feels like, at least, that he's just available to talk, and is able to kind of say things and kind of get that hype train rolling. So he talked to a couple different outlets, and we got a couple different things to go over in regards to the next game. But I want to start with, because he talked very briefly about 7 Rebirth, and that actually was doing, or is doing, pretty well in terms of sales. Now, again, what is he actually able to say? And this is what's tough, is I've always believed 7 Rebirth did pretty darn good in terms of sales, but it's Square Enix has called it, a disappointment. They've always kind of looked down, seemingly, at that one. But I've always thought, my conspiracy theory is just that they really expect Final Fantasy to save them from their other 10 mistakes. These are the people of Foam Stars. These are the people of a couple really, really big mistakes in the past 5-6 years. And when you look to a game maybe to sell, 7, 8, 9 million, maybe to make up for the other failures, and it only does 2 or 3, that can still be really good. It's just not good enough to, kind of save the company. So that's always been my conspiracy theory. But he does say the second entry, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, has been doing very well on both PS5 and PC. I know some fans have expressed concerns, but please rest assured we'll be able to deliver a proper, high-quality third installment. Development is going extremely well, and the game is shaping up nicely. A lot of the content is already playable, and the game's direction and form are firmly set in place. Right now, the team is united around refining everything. And so, there's not too much more to say about that. Good on him. And I look at it as a positive that as long as, the developers feel that the game is doing well, that could just be, again, kind of that disconnect from, the company is, these really high, people, these high executives, maybe they want a certain number, but then these, lower level, even though he's obviously a game director, they look at it and say, no, that's doing really well. I don't know what you guys were expecting, but it's in line with what we wanted. So that's good to see. Then we have this line about Final Fantasy VI. So he says, if I had all the time and money in the world, Final Fantasy VI is my favorite mainline title. That would be very cool to take on as a remake. That being said, I've put my heart and soul into Final Fantasy VII Remake series for over a decade now. Working on something completely new would be quite fun as well. And I think a lot of people's dream team when it comes to Final Fantasy VII team revolve around him. Okay, specifically Hamaguchi, maybe being just the director. Maybe you find a writer of one of these games within Square Enix that people really like. I've seen a couple mock dream teams for a Final Fantasy, which we're gonna get a Final Fantasy 17 eventually. He really would be kind of a perfect fit because I just feel he's done the job about as well as you possibly could hope for. He has had the mentorship, and that's that is really important, and I feel like it shows on his execution. Is this guy has had the leadership of all of these legends, and they've kind of filtered through him and passed it on to him, to the point where he's slowly gained more power, right? As these, Sephiroth has gained power. No, he's gained a lot of power in these 3 games, in terms of just his ability as a director. So I really think, so again, to this quote, will a bunch of Final Fantasy games eventually be remade? Yeah, I think so. But, for him, like he says, putting so much time into 7, I think you probably want to let the guy loose a little bit, even for his own sanity after this, which is probably not all that far away, by the way, and say, okay, or maybe at the same time, maybe behind the scenes they're already loosely working on Final Fantasy 17, and maybe he is in charge. But I do think he would be a really good fit. I think it works for okay, we'll give you a rest, and by giving you a rest, we'll hand you the keys to a very important franchise for us, and you make the next main game. But it would let him be able to do his own thing, right? He's learned a lot, and he's also learned a lot, I imagine, about Final Fantasy as a series that he can take and do in an original game, right, versus doing another remake. So I would honestly petition for him to do a brand new game versus to remake an older one. Okay, and then we have maybe the most important one from Audrey here. So the title has been determined. It reflects the gameplay and experience is much like the first two titles too. Hopes to reveal news in the near future. Part 3 is the last of the trilogy, and he thinks they have a suitable finale for a great send-off and wants to see the Final Fantasy series moving forward to be on multi-platform for all future titles. That's something, again, Hamaguchi is not afraid to talk about. It makes me very curious, again, we talk about 1,000 times what they'll do for part 3. I'm really interested in that, but he is not afraid to talk about, hey, I want this thing everywhere and this should be on Xbox and all this jazz. So we'll see what they do, but that's a part of it. And then in terms of the title, so yeah, I read the article she's talking about. He does say like the title is locked in, they know what it is, and they talk about like how Rebirth is about bonds, right? So bonds makes its way into the gameplay. That's like the central gameplay loop or like concept in 7 Rebirth. So and they've they did that with 7 Remake as well. So each of these, whatever the title is, there's something about it that ties directly into a gameplay system. And he talks about that gameplay system is already playable. That actually goes back to what we read a few minutes ago. They can play part of this game, and I think I saw specifically in an article him talking about like the gameplay, like whatever the word that ties into the title, that mechanic you can feel right now in the gameplay. It is playable, so that's super, super cool. And the near future thing, he said that twice in the same interview. He said like he hopes to give info within like a near future, and then at the end of the article he said something very, very similar to that, like hopefully he can reveal something soon, something along those lines. So yeah, he's dropping these small little hints. Like I really think the Game Awards is quite a possibility. They've done it before. I think Summer Game Fest they showed off Rebirth, I think maybe for the first time. They've done a couple Jeff Keighley events, so I would not be shocked at all if the Game Awards, and look, the game is still probably, from the Game Awards, maybe a year and a half out from now, maybe closer to 2 years out, but I mean, they've done it before. They've shown these games off like 1-2+ years before they come out, so I really think, especially with this now, the near future, I mean, that's not next fall, that's not and even the next state of play is probably not until like May, right? So I don't think he's talking about that. The next Xbox event is that developer direct thing they do in January. They're not going to do a Square Enix game. So what do you have? You really have the Game Awards or a random Nintendo Direct, and I don't think you're going to get one of those for a while either. So really, unless they do it on their own, the Game Awards is the next thing, the next big event that he could be talking about. And then in terms of that, they have a suitable finale for a great send-off. I saw a couple different articles where he talked about like the Beauty and the Beast remake film and this idea of, kind of giving people what has already existed, like retelling the games, and that way retelling the movie, right? But retelling the game, but trying to add layers to it where it makes it like a little bit more of a twist, and you feel like you've been on like this ride, or kind of telling it just in a slightly different way, which I think really adds, by the way, fuel to the fire with all the speculation and theories when it comes to the ending of Rebirth, and like, can they tie it all up in a pretty bow and kind of get it almost back on track with the deviations they made in Rebirth. I think the plan always was to do that, and the plan was always still to get it back on track, just in a different way than you might have thought. And I've thought that for a couple of years now, so I think I'm going to be right, because I really feel these comments about kind of respect, and they've said that all throughout, this idea of respecting the original and trying to tell it, but kind of tell it differently. I think this has always kind of been the plan, to be honest with you. So there you go. Let me know what you think. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.